Pokemon!
It's Bulbasaur! What? Pokemon is a franchise full of controversies.
Whoa! Is that blackface, dude?
And today, I'll be ignoring all that stuff to focus on what really matters. Frogs. It's frogs. While preparing for an upcoming video, Every Frog Pokemon Ranked, I checked out other people's rankings, and all of them had a strange addition that completely took me off guard. Bulbasaur. I'd never really considered these guys frogs at all. For example, when I was a kid, I used to put all of my frog Pokemon cards in their own special pile, and Bulbasaur was left out without a second thought. Have I really been overlooking the most popular line of frog Pokemon all this time? They do look vaguely frog-like if you squint, but surely not. They have Soar in their name. Or maybe that's my bias towards Squirtle talking. I mean, I've never even played a Kanto run with Bulbasaur. And if Bulbasaur is a frog, that would look pretty bad for a frog YouTuber. So it's life or death today. Either Bulbasaur's a fraud and lying for froggy clout, or Bulbasaur's a frog. And I've been sidelining a member of my favorite animal family this whole time. Bulbasaur's time is up. I'll be scouring every piece of evidence I can find and taking Bulbasaur to court to find out once and for all. This is the straw that broke the Numel's back. The public's big whiplash moment, which set a ton of Bulbasaur frog believers in motion, particularly due to what this slippery slope leads you to. The Holy Grail. What the frog believers say is the definitive proof that settles this long-standing debate. A quote directly from Ken Sugimori, an original designer of the Bulbasaur line. The interviewer asks, "What is Venusaur?" Sugimori responds, "It's like a frog." That's some pretty damning evidence, I'll admit. However, what I think is worth noting is Ken Sugimori's hesitancy to outright state that they are frogs. He just admits that frogs were a heavy inspiration when creating them, using words such as like, motif, and frog-like creature. Many, including myself up till recently, just assumed Bulby was an undisclosed dinosaur due to the soar in the name. Although that soar comes from the English localization. Revert back to the original Japanese names, and we have no reference to an animal type here. Each of their names roughly translate to strange seed, strange grass, and strange flower. Putting strange in the name kind of feels like an allusion to this unsolved mystery. It's like they're taunting me. The dinosaur defense isn't worth purely casting aside, however. Chikorita, for instance, is just that. And it's easy to see the similarities in their stout, quadrupedal bean bodies. What feels like the most exclusive dinosaur-like design choice to me is these little scale patterns, which some have pointed out could be in reference to poisonous frogs, also to indicate their poison typing, but I definitely see these more as random, rigid, cute, reptile-like shapes over anything else. And in all honesty, it reminds me of the Flintstones. Oddly enough, when Ivysaur evolves into Venusaur, they lose these dino marks in favor of warts. And before I hear any, "Ooh, warts," that must mean they're toads and not frogs. Toads actually are frogs. It's like squares and rectangles. All toads are frogs, but not all frogs are toads. So if they are toads, that also makes them frogs. But what about the most obvious features that lead us non-believers away from the frog theory? Fangs and claws. Definitely not traits associated with frogs. Well, There are some obscure frog species with each of these traits. The Luzon fanged frog, you guessed it, has fangs. But even then, these fangs are on the bottom and all gummy. Then there's the western clawed frog. Right again, they have very well defined black claws sprouting from their feet. On the other hand, dinosaurs are pretty much not even dinosaurs without those two features. And people have found a primary example of a dinosaur that might match Bulbasaur's look. The
Dicynodont
was a class of herbivore with pretty similar fangs and claws. This guy even has a similar snout. Other depictions of these guys, however, don't get brought up. Because who would look at this and think, yeah, Bulbasaur? And then there's the ears. Obviously, these aren't really found on either side of the argument. Some believe these could be parotoid glands, which are poison glands commonly found on toads, which I can see the argument for on Bulbasaur, but as we follow the evolutionary line further, oh god, he can hear me. I personally think these ears are just visual flair to round off the design. I mean, they're cat ears for crying out loud. Like, guess what else doesn't have ears? Turtles. Without them, the guy looks off. But when it comes to these other design choices, you have to fight a bit harder and dig a bit deeper to make the frog side line up. But I will say, these guys at least give a solid plausibility to a potential frog species which evolved to have fangs and claws. I'll be generous with this point for at least proving it could happen. Now how about
the plan?
That may seem pointless since obviously there aren't any animals with giant onions on their backs, but what would they really be without their plant? Oh, I feel like I should censor this. Anyway, in my opinion, the giant plant on Venusaur's back has a very prehistoric look to it, which, as it turns out, it's based on a real flower, the Rafflesia, aka stinking corpse lily, which has lineage dating all the way back to the Cretaceous period. I mean, they even double down on the prehistoric vibes in Venusaur's Mega Evolution. Throw this bad boy on a Dicynodont, and that's a point. Alright, how about we track back to their movement, where we already know Venusaur's case. And before people start accusing Game Freak of altering history, yup, these legs were always this way, baby. So, I was ready to bring up the Detective Pikachu scenes for Bulbasaur and some Super Smash Bros. Gameplay for Ivysaur and call it a day. But I didn't want to leave any stones unturned. I scoured pretty much all their movement animations, and by golly, they move an awful lot like frogs. It's also worth noting that not all frogs are always hopping. Plenty of frogs dawdle around like little stumpy babies. These Bulbasaur are also pretty much always chilling next to some water. I don't know about you, but to me, that seems like some pretty amphibious behavior. Honestly, I'm shocked by how consistently and undeniably frog-like these movement animations are. But I still don't know if that's enough to win me over. Look at them! Look at them! Ah! Detective Pikachu dared to ask, what if Pokemon were real? And part of me wishes it didn't. I'm a bit torn on how frog-like this live-action Bulbasaur is. Its skin is pretty scaly, and they don't move a lot like frogs, especially in comparison to the games. However, they are found by the water, and I would say that their mouths look super froggy. How about we turn to the source? RJ Palmer, a concept artist for Detective Pikachu, wrote, "It really bothers me whenever I see a more realistic take on the Bulbasaur line as frogs. I don't care for frogs, and I really like Bulbasaur, so therefore he isn't a frog. What the
Fungus.
You purposely designed them veering away from frogs cause you don't like them? I never planned on taking this live-action Bulbasaur too seriously, cause I know damn well that creature is not an Apalm. But This quote really has me wanting to stand up for my kind and go all in on Team Frog. Instead, I'll just say, it is not looking good for Team Knot, especially when they have to bring an anti-frog propaganda spreader to the stand. Also, is it just me, or does it seem like the sound design team might disagree with RJ's frog slander? I agree, it sounds a bit too loose to feel substantial. However, this seems a lot froggier. And if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, I'm sorry, he said he doesn't like frogs? But what do I know? I'm not a Pokemon professor. I'm not named after a tree. If only there were official research and documentation, cataloged in some sort of in-game index. Oh! So I sifted through all their Pokedex entries, and everything's about their plant or them basking in the sun. This plus the ears, are we sure these guys aren't cats? And across all entries for this Pokemon line, I could only find one thing that might prove something. This Pokedex entry for Ivysaur says,
when the bulb on its back grows large, it appears to lose the ability to stand on its hind legs.
Since when could Bulbasaur and Ivysaur stand on their hind legs? First of all, I'm well aware this can seem redundant when these guys exist. But let's consider the fact that if Bulbasaur is a frog, they're a quadrupedal frog. And quadrupedal frog physiology doesn't even allow them to balance or bend in this way, let alone walk around like this. You know what animals also normally walk on all fours but can sometimes walk on their hind legs? Lizards. Which just so happens to be what SOAR stands for. Bulbasaur is a frog, in ways. Bulbasaur is also a dinosaur, in ways. But ultimately, Bulbasaur is Bulbasaur. These ears aren't glands, they're just cute cat ears. Like, we could start nitpicking any and every Pokemon design and get nowhere. Yeah, I just don't really think he's a frog. Like, look at him. He has random spikes all over. He's a ninja? Frogs aren't ninjas. He's bipedal, and I mean, no frog could just have their tongue out at all times, or else it'd completely dry out. Okay, wait, he's got a point with that last part. Why is his tongue out all the time? Because it's cool! Like, this isn't a frog, but this is a fish? In what world do cats and whales mate, lay eggs, and this thing just pops out of an egg an eighth of its size like it's nothing? Pokemon. It's the beautiful thing about just letting a game be a game sometimes. We can escape to a world where frogs are ninjas and whale lords get pussy. I think it's perfectly fine to see Bulbasaur as a frog. There's enough evidence to make it make sense, and if that makes you like them more, good for you. And if on the other end, them being plump little dinos helps you sleep at night, then good for you too. And here's my pitch to help bridge the gap. This is a Triadobatrachus, the alleged first frog, a prehistoric dinosaur frog, which is cute, stout, and stumpy enough to be the best of both worlds when identifying Bulbasaur. As for my preference, it's hard to take a creature you've known so well as one thing and mold it into something else. But honestly, in the process of researching for this video, the more evidence I found in support of frog, the happier I got. Maybe this beautiful Bulby biscuit could be a species of my favorite animal. But what this really did for me was make me appreciate the Bulbasaur line even more, showing the web of inspiration that could lead to a truly perfect design. So why are we, as Bulbasaur fans, getting mad at someone for saying they think Bulbasaur is or isn't a frog? Don't we all agree that they're cute, a great pal to take on an adventure, and the best choice in their original game due to type advantage? Well, I've got a confession to make. Way back when I was like 8 or 9, my little sister heard this cool thing you could do with a playing card, where you would use a clothespin to attach it to your bike, and it would make this cool sound by slapping the tire when you ride it. Excitedly, my little sister begged me to let her use one of my Pokemon cards. Just let me borrow one you don't care about. Just let me borrow one you don't care about. I could have picked any of my duplicate generic birds. Heck, I've never liked this creepy Marshtomp card. But nope. I let her use the only Bulbasaur line card I had. And this is just a few layers of paper, I'm well aware, but this paper really symbolizes my neglect of a frog I never noticed. So this video goes out to Bulbasaur, a fictional creature from a video game. A fictional frog creature from a video game. Also, its shiny looks deliberately more frog-like. Boom! Team Frog wins. This is the objective truth. Suck it! And here we are, with newfound family members ready to be forced into a social hierarchy. Subscribe to see where these guys and the rest of the frog Pokemon rank in this future video. If you liked the video, please like the video, and comment down below whether Bulbasaur's a frog to you. And remember, I'm just a frog with something I still need to do.